I've worked as a security guard for most of my life. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills. Gas stations, convenience stores, small shops, places where you're mostly just sitting around, keeping an eye on things. But when I saw the ad for a night shift at the local mall, I thought I'd finally stumbled on something better. The pay was good, better than anything I'd seen in years. The hours weren't bad either, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was just one building, and I figured it would be quiet and easy. How hard could it be? I could already imagine sitting back in the security office, watching the cameras, and walking around in a place that felt too big for the silence of the night. I applied immediately and got a call the next day. It was the manager, Mr. Hensley, asking if I could come in for an interview that afternoon. It seemed sudden, but I didn't question it. I needed the job, and the mall wasn't far from where I lived. I drove over, trying to shake the feeling that this was all happening too fast. Was the mall that desperate for a night guard? The interview was quick, almost rushed. Hensley asked about my experience, but it didn't feel like he was paying attention. He ran through the basics, check the cameras every 15 to 30 minutes, do hourly patrols. Nothing out of the ordinary. By the end of it, he looked at me and asked, "Can you start tonight?" That surprised me. Most places want time for paperwork or background checks, but I wasn't about to argue. "Sure," I said, trying not to sound too eager. He looked relieved. "Great. We're understaffed," he admitted, rubbing his temples like the day had been too long. "Last few guards didn't last. I hope you'll be different." His words gave me pause. What did he mean by that? But before I could ask, he handed me a key to the office and told me to report at 11 p.m. sharp. The quicker I started, the quicker I'd get paid, I told myself. I shook his hand, left the office, and went home to get a few hours of sleep before my shift. When I arrived at the mall, it was dark and deserted. The parking lot, which during the day was packed with cars, was almost entirely empty. A few scattered vehicles sat under the dim glow of the parking lights, but the space felt too big, too quiet. It made the building look like a sleeping giant, and for a second, I considered turning around and going home. Something felt wrong. I brushed it off as first-day nerves and walked up to the employee entrance. Mr. Hensley met me at the door. He didn't say much, just led me through the winding corridors to the security office, explaining the basic protocols again as we walked. The office itself was small, a cramped room at the back of the mall filled with screens displaying grainy footage from the cameras scattered around the building. "Check the cameras every 15 to 30 minutes, he reminded me. "Do your rounds, make sure nothing's out of place. The usual." He glanced at me before adding, "And keep an eye on the escalators and the play area. Things happen there sometimes." That last part made me pause. "Things happen?" He waved a hand dismissively. "Kids, mostly. Trying to sneak in or mess around after hours. You'll see." I nodded, though his tone made my skin crawl a little. He handed me a printed sheet of standard instructions, shook my hand again, and said, "Good luck. I'll see you in the morning." Once he left, I was alone. The silence of the empty mall settled over me like a heavy blanket. I took a seat in front of the monitors, flipping through the camera feeds. The escalators were still, the stores dark and empty. For a moment I relaxed. It was just a mall, nothing creepy about that. Just a big, empty building. After a few minutes, I felt a presence behind me. I jumped, my heart pounding. There, standing just beside me, was a janitor. He grinned, clearly amused by my reaction. "Didn't mean to scare you, buddy," he said, his voice light. "You must be the new guy." I let out a nervous laugh, trying to shake off the tension. "Yeah, that's me. I didn't know there was a janitor here at night." He shrugged. "They always keep one of us around to clean up, make sure everything's ready for the next day." His tone turned a bit more serious. "Just make sure you follow the rules." I blinked. "The rules? You mean the instructions?" He handed me a crumpled piece of paper, looking at me with an unsettling seriousness. "These aren't from the manager. These are the rules you'll need if you want to make it through the night." I unfolded the paper, half expecting some kind of joke, but the list of rules it contained was anything but funny. Rules to keep you safe at night. Rule 1. Check the security cameras every 15 to 30 minutes, but don't stare at the footage for too long. Rule 2. Never look directly at the mannequins after midnight. If the mannequins change positions, leave the area immediately. I stared at the list, my gut tightening with discomfort. "You're serious?" The janitor's grin had vanished. "I'm warning you, follow the rules or you'll end up like the last guy." I tried to laugh it off. "You mean the last guard?" He nodded, his eyes cold. "He quit after one night." "Okay." I stuffed the paper into my pocket without checking the rest of the list, chuckling nervously. "Well, I'm going to make my first round." The janitor stepped aside, giving me a long look before saying, "Take care." I nodded and left the office, but his words stuck with me. Something about his tone, his look, it felt off, like he was genuinely afraid. But I wasn't going to let some weird list of rules mess with my head. It was just past midnight when I started my patrol. The mall was eerie at night, much more so than I expected. The dim lighting cast long, twisting shadows along the tiled floors. Every sound felt amplified, my footsteps echoing off the walls, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant creaks and groans of the building settling. As I made my way down one of the main hallways, I tried to focus on the task at hand. The mall wasn't huge, but it was big enough to need regular patrols. There were plenty of stores to check, some of them abandoned, some locked up, with displays peeking out from the darkness behind their glass fronts. A children's play area stood near the food court, silent and still, the colorful plastic toys looking strange and lifeless under the dim emergency lights. Farther down, I could make out the escalators, still and frozen in their usual ascent, like relics from a busier time. I was getting used to the silence when I noticed something strange in one of the clothing stores. The store door was wide open. I stopped, my flashlight sweeping over the darkened interior. I couldn't see anything out of place at first, but as I moved the beam around the store, I noticed movement in my peripheral vision, a slight shift, like something or someone was hiding in the dark. I turned my head to look directly at it, but there was nothing. Just a few mannequins standing near the back, as motionless as always. I sighed and shook my head. It was nothing. Just my nerves. I wasn't going to let that janitor's creepy list get into my head. Then I heard it. The faint sound of clothing rustling. My flashlight flicked back toward the mannequins, and there it was. One of them had definitely moved. It was standing a little closer now, slightly out of position compared to the others. I could feel my heartbeat start to quicken. "Hey, Mr. Janitor!" I called out, more out of frustration than anything else. This had to be some kind of prank. He was probably watching me from the shadows, trying to freak me out. But there was no answer. Just the soft, unsettling shuffle of fabric behind me again. I turned slowly, my flashlight scanning the mannequins, and that's when I saw it. One of them had changed positions again, its head now facing directly toward the exit. My breath hitched in my throat. No one else was here. There was no way this was a trick. I backed out of the store quickly. I didn't want to stay any longer than necessary. As I walked away, I kept glancing over my shoulder. And then I heard it. Footsteps. But not normal footsteps. They were heavy, rough, like wood or plastic scraping against the floor. My heart started pounding in my chest. I turned around and there it was, the same mannequin from the store. It stood in the middle of the hallway, staring at me with its blank, lifeless face. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I watched it. Slowly, stiffly, it started to move toward me, its joints creaking and groaning with every step. Its movements were robotic, stiff, like a doll being dragged forward. I did what any sane person would do. I ran. I turned on my heel and bolted down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness of the mall. I didn't care how ridiculous I looked. I just needed to get away from that thing. I rounded the corner, ducking into the hallway that led toward the restrooms. The footsteps behind me had stopped, but I didn't dare look back. I burst into the restroom, splashing cold water on my face, trying to convince myself that it was all in my head. But as I looked into the mirror, I saw something else. A woman was standing near the stalls, her back to me, dressed in the plain uniform of a cleaning lady. I blinked, and she was gone. My heart skipped a beat. I spun around, but there was no one there. The restroom was empty. I collapsed to my knees, exhausted and terrified. What was happening? I tried to gather my thoughts, to make sense of it all, but nothing was adding up. Then I remembered the list. I pulled the crumpled paper from my pocket and unfolded it with shaking hands. There, written plainly in black ink, were the next few rules. Rule 3. If a mannequin looks like it's following you, don't look back. Mannequins sometimes follow guards, but if you ignore them, they'll stop. If you look, they'll know you're aware, and they'll get closer. I felt my heart sink. I had looked. Rule 4. Avoid looking into the mirrors of the restroom. Too late for that. My stomach twisted in knots as I realized I had already broken 2 of the rules. Whatever was happening, I was making it worse. Rule 5. If you hear someone talking inside an abandoned store, do not listen. I swallowed hard. I hadn't heard anyone yet, but just knowing the rule had there made me uneasy. Rule 6. If you hear a child laughing from the play area, leave immediately. Rule 7. If you check the time and it's earlier than the last time you looked, immediately return to the security office. I glanced at my watch, instinctively checking the time. It read 11:30 p.m. My blood ran cold. There was no way it was 11:30. I had started my patrol after midnight, and it had been a while since then. This wasn't possible. I didn't need to be told twice. I rushed out of the restroom, my heart racing as I made my way back toward the security office. The air around me seemed heavier now, more oppressive, and the lights overhead flickered faintly. The mall, once a place I had thought would be quiet and safe, now felt like a living entity, watching and waiting. I reached the office, slamming the door behind me. My breathing was ragged, my nerves frayed. I checked my watch again. It was almost 1 a.m. That seemed right. But what had happened earlier? Why had the time changed like that? I sat down, trying to steady my shaking hands. I needed to keep my head on straight. I wasn't going to let this place get to me. I pulled out the list again, reading through the remaining rules. Rule 8. Lock the security office door between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., and do not open it for anyone. If they knock, they might not be the person you think they are. Check the cameras to confirm. Rule 9. If you hear someone crying in a dressing room, do not open the door. Rule 10. If you hear an escalator running, do not investigate. Watch the area on the security cameras. Rule 11. Under no circumstances should you leave before your shift ends. If you do, you risk something following you outside the mall. I let out a nervous laugh. What kind of job had I taken? Who had written these rules? I couldn't make sense of any of it. But as I sat there, the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me. The mannequin, the time shifting, the figure in the mirror. This wasn't normal. Whatever was going on, I needed to survive the night. It was past 1 a.m., and I needed to go for another round. As much as I wanted to stay locked in the security office, I knew I had to follow the security protocols also. The cameras showed nothing unusual, so I gathered my courage and stepped back out into the mall. As I walked cautiously through the main hallway, I started hearing something. A faint mumbling coming from an abandoned store. My blood ran cold as I remembered Rule 5. I stopped in my tracks, heart pounding in my chest. The mumbling sound coming from the abandoned store was quiet, barely audible over the faint hum of the mall's air conditioning. But it was unmistakable. There was someone or something talking inside. I forced myself to move, my legs feeling like lead. Rule 5 echoed in my head. If you hear someone talking inside an abandoned store, do not listen. I tried to block out the sound, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the soft, incomprehensible murmurs persisted, growing louder the closer I got to the store. I glanced at the glass storefront. The windows were covered with paper, blocking any view of the inside. My breath hitched as I quickened my pace, refusing to even glance in its direction. I didn't want to know what was behind those papers or what was causing that sound. The voice was rising now, clearer but still distorted, like someone talking underwater. I had to get away. I made it past the store, refusing to look back. The voice began to fade, and I felt the tension in my body ease slightly. But as I turned the corner and entered the next corridor, I heard it again. Footsteps, but not normal footsteps. They were rough, uneven, like the dragging sound of something solid scraping against the floor, almost like wood or plastic. My stomach twisted. I knew what it was before I even turned around. It was the mannequin. My instinct screamed at me not to look back, remembering Rule 3. If a mannequin looks like it's following you, don't look back. If you ignore them, they'll stop. If you look, they'll know you're aware, and they'll get closer. I walked faster, keeping my eyes straight ahead, trying to ignore the growing sound of the mannequin's movements behind me. Each step it took seemed heavier, more deliberate. My heart raced as the footsteps grew closer, but I didn't dare turn around. Just keep walking. Just keep walking, I told myself. The sound of the mannequin's movement grew fainter, and eventually I could no longer hear it. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and slowed my pace. My hands were shaking, but at least I had followed the rule. Whatever was following me had stopped for now. Then I heard something else. The distant hum of machinery. An escalator, running. I froze, the blood draining from my face. Rule 10. If you hear an escalator running, do not investigate. Watch the area on the security cameras. I turned on my heel and bolted for the security office. I wasn't going to risk breaking another rule, especially after what I had just been through. My mind raced as I rushed back down the hallway, past the now quiet abandoned store, and toward the safety of the security office. I could hear the escalator in the distance, that unmistakable mechanical whir, but I didn't stop. I burst into the office, slammed the door behind me, and locked it. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. I immediately turned my attention to the security monitors, flipping through the camera feeds. The escalator camera came into view, and there it was. A figure. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was something else. The figure was tall, unnaturally tall, its limbs long and spindly, its face obscured by shadows. It was standing on the escalator, its body stiff and jerky, moving in slow, unnatural movements as the steps carried it upward. I stared at the screen, frozen in place. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. The figure's head turned slowly, as if sensing something. And then, impossibly, it looked straight at the camera, straight at me. The monitors started flickering, static filling the screens, a loud buzzing sound filling the room. I snapped my gaze away from the camera, remembering Rule 1. Don't stare at the footage for too long. The buzzing stopped almost immediately, and when I glanced back at the monitors, the escalator was empty. The figure was gone. I sat back in my chair, my body trembling. I couldn't do this anymore. My nerves were shot, and the rules, those damned rules, were starting to feel like a cruel game designed to break me. I just had to make it through the night. Just a few more hours, I told myself. The next hours passed in silence. I stayed in the security office, too shaken to do another round. I kept glancing at the monitors, watching the empty hallways, the still stores, the escalator that remained motionless now. Everything seemed calm, but the air in the office was thick with tension. Then, I heard something that sent a cold wave of dread down my spine. A knock at the door. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. I froze, my eyes darting toward the security monitors to check the hallway outside the office. There was no one there, but the knock came again, 3 sharp raps against the door, as if someone was standing just outside. And then I heard a voice. "Hey, how's the night going? Still think the rules are funny?" It was the janitor, or at least it sounded like him. I swallowed hard, remembering Rule 8. Lock the security office door between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., and do not open it for anyone. If they knock, they might not be the person you think they are. Check the cameras to confirm. I glanced at the clock. It was 4:03 a.m. My heart pounded in my chest as I checked the camera feed again. The hallway outside the office was completely empty, but the knocking continued, more insistent this time. The janitor's voice echoed through the door, sounding friendly but somehow off. "Come on, open up. I'll tell you what's really going on here." I stood frozen, my hand hovering near the door handle. My mind raced. It sounded like the janitor, but I knew better than to trust my instincts at this point. I checked the camera again, still nothing. The hallway was empty. I couldn't open the door. I wouldn't. The knocking stopped suddenly. Silence filled the office again, and I let out a shaky breath. I kept watching the camera, not daring to move, until finally the janitor appeared on the screen. He was standing right outside the door now, staring straight into the camera. He knocked again, his face twisted into an eerie grin. I felt my stomach drop. The way he stared into the camera, it didn't seem human. His body started to waver, like he was made of smoke, and then, slowly, he dissipated into the air, leaving nothing but an empty hallway. I checked the clock. 4:30 a.m. Whatever it had been, it was gone now. For the first time in hours, the air felt still. The oppressive weight that had been hanging over me seemed to lift, if only a little. I could feel the tension easing from my shoulders, though my body still felt like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. I stood up, my muscles aching from being hunched over the monitors for so long. I needed to stretch my legs, to move around, if only to shake off the lingering dread that clung to me like a shadow. After everything that had happened, I wasn't keen on doing another full patrol, but staying in the office felt stifling. Maybe a short walk, just around the immediate area of the office, would help clear my head. The mall was still deathly quiet, the faint hum of electricity the only sound that echoed through the corridors. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to shift as I walked. I kept my eyes down, trying not to focus on the mannequins, the stores, or the eerie silence that had settled over everything. As I rounded the corner near the security office, I nearly jumped out of my skin. The janitor was standing there, leaning casually against the wall with that same friendly grin he'd had the first time we met. It was the real janitor this time, at least, I hoped it was. He seemed more human, more tangible than the strange apparition I'd seen earlier in the night. "Rough night?" he asked, his voice light, almost teasing. I didn't know how to respond. I stood there, my mind racing as I tried to reconcile what I had seen earlier. The knocks, the figure dissolving into mist, with the man standing in front of me now. "You could say that," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. He tilted his head, his grin fading slightly. "You followed the rules, didn't you?" "I tried," I said, my throat dry. "What is this place? Why are these rules even a thing?" The janitor let out a low chuckle, but it wasn't the friendly, warm sound it had been earlier in the night. This laugh was hollow, tinged with something darker. "I told you the rules are there to keep you safe," he said, his eyes narrowing. "There's more going on here than you understand. Much more." I took a step back, my unease growing with every word he spoke. "What do you mean? What's going on in this mall?" He shrugged, the grin returning to his face. "You'll figure it out, or maybe you won't. Either way, there's no escaping it." He started to walk away, turning down the dimly lit corridor without another word. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he wasn't in any rush to leave. I couldn't let it go. I needed to know what he was talking about. I needed answers. "Wait," I called after him, my voice echoing down the empty hallway. "What do you mean, no escaping it? What are you trying to say?" The janitor didn't stop. He kept walking, his footsteps eerily quiet against the tiled floor. Desperation and frustration bubbled up inside me, and before I knew it, I was following him, determined to get some kind of explanation. I rounded the corner after him, but when I got there, the hallway was empty. He was gone. Again. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood there, staring down the empty corridor. There was no way he could have disappeared so quickly. He had just been there. I looked around, scanning the area for any sign of him, but the mall had fallen back into its eerie silence. And then I heard it. A soft, muffled crying. The sound was faint at first, almost too quiet to notice. But as I stood there, frozen in place, it grew louder, more distinct. A woman's voice, sobbing quietly, somewhere nearby. My skin prickled with unease. I knew the rules. I had them memorized by now, and I knew exactly what this was. Rule 9. If you hear someone crying in a dressing room, do not open the door. I swallowed hard, trying to block out the sound, but the crying persisted. It seemed to be coming from one of the stores up ahead, the muffled sobs echoing faintly through the deserted hallways. Every instinct I had was telling me to walk away, to get back to the office, and wait out the last hour of my shift in silence. But there was something about the crying that pulled me toward it, an almost magnetic force that made it impossible to ignore. What if someone really needed help? What if this was all in my head? What if the rules were just some sick jokes? I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. I had already broken too many of the rules tonight. This wasn't a joke. The janitor had warned me, and I wasn't about to ignore him now. But still, the crying continued. It was louder now, more insistent, the sound echoing from somewhere deeper in the store just ahead of me. It didn't sound right. It was too hollow, too distorted, like a recording of someone crying rather than an actual person. I stood there, torn between curiosity and fear, until finally, the decision was made for me. The crying stopped. Suddenly, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The air felt thick, oppressive, like the walls of the mall were closing in on me. My chest tightened, and I realized I had been holding my breath. Then slowly, a figure appeared on one of the security cameras I had been monitoring through the corridor. I had left the office, but the cameras were still connected to my device. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen as I saw her. A woman, pale, with long dark hair that hung limply over her face, obscuring her features. She was dressed in plain, outdated clothing, her body hunched over as she moved slowly down the hallway, her feet barely touching the ground. She was floating. My heart leapt into my throat as I watched her approach the dressing room, her body drifting closer to the entrance, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She hovered just outside the door, as if waiting for me to follow her inside. I took a step back, my pulse racing. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I had seen things tonight, strange things, but this was something else entirely. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the figure to disappear, to leave me alone. When I opened them, she was gone. But the crying had started again, this time, right behind me. I didn't think. I bolted down the hallway, running as fast as my legs would carry me. The sound of the woman's cries echoed through the halls, growing louder and more desperate with every step I took. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare risk another glance. All I knew was that I needed to get out of there, now. By the time I reached the security office, I was breathless, my entire body trembling with fear. I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it as quickly as I could, and collapsed into the chair in front of the monitors. My chest heaved with each breath, the adrenaline still coursing through me. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered faintly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I felt trapped, like a cornered animal, with no way out but the faint hope that my shift would end soon. I glanced at the monitors. My heart sank. There she was, the woman. The same pale figure, her hair hanging limply over her face, moving in that unnatural, hovering way. She was no longer just roaming the halls. She was headed directly toward the security office. My blood ran cold as I watched her on the monitors. She floated down the hallway, closer and closer, her slow, jerky movements unnerving. She didn't walk like a normal person. She barely moved her feet at all, gliding just above the ground. The sobbing was gone, but the weight of her presence was suffocating. It was as if the very air around her distorted with her approach, bending reality itself. I checked the camera feeds desperately, flipping between angles. She was getting closer. My breath quickened as I watched her drift past the closed stores, her face obscured by her hair, her arms limp at her sides. Every second she got nearer, and I felt my panic rising, clawing at my throat. I reached for the list of rules, gripping it tightly in my trembling hands. Don't open the door. I repeated the thought over and over in my head, like a mantra. Don't open the door no matter what. The woman stopped just outside the security office. I could see her now on the monitor, the camera trained right on the door. She stood there, silent and still, like a statue. For a moment, I dared to hope that she would leave, that maybe she'd fade away like a bad dream. But then the knocking started. Soft at first, barely a tap. But each knock grew louder, more forceful, until it felt like the entire door was rattling. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else. She was there, just inches away on the other side, and I could feel her presence like a cold weight pressing down on me. I checked the monitor again, praying she would vanish, but she didn't. Her body was rigid, unmoving, but the knocking continued, growing louder and more violent with each passing second. The door frame shook, as if it wouldn't hold much longer. I clamped my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, trying to block her out. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But the knocking only grew more intense, more insistent, like someone pounding with their fists. My heart raced, my body trembling as I stared at the door, unable to move. Then I heard it. "Hey, open up. It's the manager." I froze. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It was Mr. Hensley. But something felt wrong. I checked the clock, my heart thundering in my chest. 6:01 a.m. Relief washed over me, but suspicion crept in immediately. Was it really him? Or was this another trick? I checked the camera one last time. The woman was gone. No sign of the pale figure, no shadow, no presence. "Everything okay in there?" Mr. Hensley's voice called again, sounding closer now, more concerned. "Open up, your shift's over." I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle. I had survived the night, hadn't I? The clock showed it was past 6 a.m., and nothing had come for me in those final moments. But the events of the night had shaken me to the core, and I wasn't ready to trust anything, anyone, without checking one last time. I glanced at the monitor one last time, double-checking the feed outside the office. And there he was, Mr. Hensley, standing just outside the door, looking exactly as he had when I first met him. No eerie figure, no distorted face. Just him, the manager. With a trembling hand, I unlocked the door and opened it. Mr. Hensley stood there, his expression softening as he saw the look on my face. "Rough night, huh?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. "Yeah, you could say that." He frowned, noticing the look of fear etched across my face. "You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed bitterly under my breath. "Something like that." I didn't go into detail. I didn't tell him about the mannequin or the crying woman. It didn't seem real anymore. I was just happy the night was over, but something gnawed at me, something that I needed to know before I left this place for good. "What about the janitor?" I asked suddenly. "The one who works the night shift?" Mr. Hensley looked at me, puzzled. "What janitor?" My stomach dropped. "The one who was here all night." He gave me a list of rules to follow. Mr. Hensley shook his head, his expression turning serious. "There's no night janitor. No one works here at night except you." My mind reeled. The pieces didn't fit together. None of it made sense. I stared at Mr. Hensley, my thoughts racing. If there was no janitor, then who or what had been warning me? And the rules? Where had they come from? I didn't ask any more questions. I handed him my keys, quit on the spot, and walked out of the mall without looking back. Whatever had happened there, whatever lurked in the dark corners of that place, I wasn't going to stick around to find out more. As I drove away, the weight of the night still heavy on my chest, I realized that some places are better left alone. And that mall? It was one of them. I will never return to that place again.